we've got to begin with a bit of a difficult, shall we say, story that some of you will not want to believe. But I've got to remind you of an important situation, an important story. Years ago, Beau Biden, President Joe Biden's son, the then Attorney General for Delaware. He was the Attorney General for Delaware. He had cancer. He not only had cancer, he had a malignant glioblastoma brain cancer. And it was abundantly apparent that he was not going to live. In fact, he had surgery to remove as much of the tumor as they could, and then went on, canceled his television appearances, reduced his visibility, stopped doing a lot of interviews, clearly had a new haircut when he was revealed, and they insisted that he had a clean bill of health. In fact, the Biden family had a doctor release a statement to the media that Beau Biden had a clean bill of health, even though they knew he was dying. I'm not making this up. This is true. This is a real story. This happened. Beau Biden had brain cancer. They knew he wasn't going to survive, and the Biden family lied about it. They lied fairly regularly about it. And now comes Joe Biden, and we're supposed to believe, given the pattern of this family lying about things like this, and the extended cover-up of Joe Biden, we're somehow supposed to believe that this was all surprise. They didn't bother testing. In fact, I want to play you this conversation. This is from CBS This Morning. They have on their medical expert who also had been an advisor, a medical advisor to Joe Biden, carrying the water, and just listen to how they lack curiosity about the situation.
Thought it took a while to do that. Wouldn't he be getting regular checkups?
Yeah, so it depends on the kind of cancer you're talking about here. We do know it's quite aggressive again. So the time in which it would take to spread to the bones is going to be shorter than with a less aggressive cancer. And he's 82. Normally, doctors will stop screening for prostate cancer at 75 or so, because after that, the prostate cancers you typically pick up are very slow growing. And so the harms of all of the testing and treatment for something that may not kill you, you're talking about risk versus benefit. It may not be worth the risk.
Isn't there a blood test that men can take to know if they have an issue that might warrant further examination?
So there's something that we call a PSA test, but that can also be indicative of many different things. It could just be you have an enlarged prostate. Maybe you have a low-grade infection in the prostate. There are many things that can cause that. And so this is, again, why after a certain age, doctors will typically stop screening for prostate cancer.
Wow.
But in his case, it's not screening. It's important to emphasize this was diagnostic because he had urinary symptoms. And so there was a reason to do more testing.
Quickly, what is your final message to men of a certain age?
Well, men of a certain age, you need to be seeing your primary care doctor for regular exams. And it's not just for prostate cancer.
Now, thank you to Newsbusters, by the way, for capturing that clip. But wait a second. This is no ordinary man. This was the president of the United States of America and his former advisor, now medical correspondent, and analyst for CBS, with no pushback from the CBS morning panel, which, by the way, has been very sympathetic to Joe Biden, very hostile to the Republicans. We're just supposed to accept at face value that they didn't even bother with PSA screening for the president. They did for Donald Trump, despite his age. They did for Barack Obama, despite his age. They did for George W. Bush. I mean, when Donald Trump was president of the United States, they were testing his PSA. And this goes. Let me just roll back here to the particular question and answer here on PSA.
So there's what we call a PSA test, but that can also be indicative of many different things. It could have an enlarged prostate. Maybe you have a low-grade infection in the prostate. There are many things that can cause that. And so this is, again, why after a certain age, doctors will typically stop screening for prostate cancer.
Wow.
But in his case, it's not screening. It's important to emphasize this was diagnostic.
And that's the key. So they weren't even screening as president of the United States. Why is that? Again, I think it's very important for us to say we should be in prayer for Joe Biden, but we should not give Joe Biden the benefit of the doubt, nor should we give those around him the benefit of the doubt, including doctors who are sympathetic to him. The media has a pattern of covering for Joe Biden. In February of 2024, Matt Visor, who is the Washington Post White House bureau chief, wrote a piece about the Robert Hur testimony, and it was clearly an insider account with direct access to Biden's team to give people a sense of the Biden team's thinking and how shocked they were at Robert Hur's conclusions. And when the actual transcript, not the audio, came out, Matt Visor tweeted in March of 2024, quote, "Biden doesn't come across as absent-minded as Hur has made him out to be." Well, now we have the actual audio, and it comes out as even worse than what Robert Hur said. He was being charitable, and yet Matt Visor carried water for the Biden administration. And now J.D. Vance has come out and questioned who is actually in control in the White House, that Joe Biden doesn't seem to have been fit at all to be president. And you know what Matt Visor has done? Essentially labeled anyone who questions Joe Biden's account of his prostate cancer diagnosis as a conspiracy theorist. And that includes Zeke Emanuel, who is a medical oncology expert, world-renowned oncology expert, no less, who went on MSNBC and said he's had this for a while. You just don't get prostate cancer that can spread to the bone in a matter of months. You just don't do it. It's not possible. And guess what? They found one oncologist, one, at Mass General Brigham, Jason F. Stathue, to say it's certainly possible for more aggressive advanced cancer should develop in a setting with low PSA or develop and spread rather quickly on the order of less than a year. They weren't even looking at Joe Biden's PSA. How do we know what his PSA levels were? They weren't checking. They conveniently leave that out of the story. It's kind of a 3-card Monty shuffling the cards around, find the truth in it. They're covering for him. They're covering for him. And again, all the other presidents had their PSA checked. In February of 2023, Politico's Jonathan Martin ran a piece of Democratic insiders lamenting Joe Biden's mental and physical frailty, but also attacking Kamala Harris, the Democrats were, for her failure to rise to the occasion. Almost a year to the day that Jonathan Martin pinned that piece, he pinned a piece with the headline, "Get used to it, Biden isn't going anywhere," insisting Republicans were conspiracy theorists for thinking Joe Biden would drop out of the race. By the way, once he did and Kamala Harris got in the race, Jonathan Martin began pinning a series of fan fiction columns in Politico about how if she just showed that she was capable of bipartisan governance, she could win. And when she didn't do that, and instead continued to attack Donald Trump, he pinned pieces blasting her for not taking his advice. And then when the Democrats ultimately lost, he pinned a piece. I kid you not. This is the headline of Jonathan Martin's piece. Democrats wonder, are we too correct? And he pinned this remarkable sentence. Democrats had, quote, wanted to redouble their commitment to those under duress at a time of threat. Now, J.D. Vance on Air Force Two, flying back to the United States, questions whether Joe Biden was ever fit to be president of the United States. And Jonathan Martin decries it as being too online. This is most interesting as a real-time depiction of somebody struggling between the responsibilities of high office and the temptations that come with being totally online. Apparently, 70% of Americans are too online, including the people who are offline, because this is a concern that most Americans have. And Jonathan Martin, who fluffed up the Biden administration for 4 years, Matt Visor, who fluffed up the Biden administration for 4 years, CBS News that did the same. Apparently, they were so used to having Joe Biden in their mouth, they decided now they've got him back in there, they'll just do some navel gazing of Biden and not question anything. They'll call out the conspiracy theorists on the right. You know, these remarkable conspiracy theories on the right, they keep coming true. The Tapper Thompson book comes out on Monday. If I have a criticism of the book, I don't think it actually does cover the press's complicity. Now, I understand why. given who's writing the book, they're not going to go after their own, but it is remarkable how quickly the press has sprung into the role of defending Joe Biden and calling anyone who doubts his cancer diagnosis conspiracy theory. These people's trust is in the gutter, and they don't care. They do not care. They are in a bubble with the Democrats. They had an opportunity to redeem themselves and finally tell the truth, and they can't bring themselves to tell the truth because they would rather fluff up Joe Biden's family narrative. Here's the truth. It is the God's honest truth. It is documented. When Beau Biden had brain cancer and was going to die, Joe Biden and his family assured the public that Beau Biden had a clean bill of health, which is basically the exact same language being used by the Biden family in the White House with their doctor. The fact that they did this to Beau Biden fits a pattern of deception to the American public. And the fact that the media would rather ignore it highlights one of the problems with the media. When Democrats say anything, they're treated by the press as honest. When Republicans say anything, no matter how truthful, they're treated as dishonest. It is another sign of media bias in this. It is why so many people don't believe the press, and it is why the press is incapable of redemption and needs to be burned to the ground with salt poured over the charred remains so they can never spring back. These people want to go bankrupt, and they've already been bankrupt in the truth. The fact that Politico, Washington Post, CBS This Morning, and others are carrying water for the Biden family, treating as a conspiracy theory what is truthful, that he had prostate cancer while as president. That's why we have no PSA tests. Is an abomination. It's an attack on the truth. It's something if the Republicans did it, the media would be furious about. But because it's Biden, they don't care. Because it's Biden, they'll cover for him. And we should pray for Joe Biden. He doesn't deserve the benefit of the doubt. And you will recall that these same reporters, when he had that horrible CNN debate, rushed out to say, well, he has a cold. No, turns out he had prostate cancer. But he also had dementia. And all these people in the press decided better to cover for Joe Biden than to be truthful and honest. And the punchline and the irony is, because they did that, Donald Trump got reelected. And because they're continuing to do it, maybe Donald Trump really could get that third term.